It was a busy Tuesday morning outside the Lahore High Court. People rushed past, sellers called out their goods, and the sounds of Pakistan's second-largest city filled the air. In the middle of this normal scene, a 25-year-old pregnant woman was about to be beaten to death by her father, brothers, and cousins, while dozens of people watched and did nothing. Farzana had walked to the courthouse that morning, thinking she was finally going to be free. She and her husband Muhammad Iqbal were there to end a legal fight that had taken up months of their short marriage. All she had to do was tell a judge that she had married willingly, that she wasn't being held against her will, and that she chose love over the arranged marriage her family had planned. She never made it inside the building. When the first brick hit her head, witnesses later said, she cried out, "Don't kill me." But the attack had moved beyond rescue or talk. Her father had made his choice. Family honor needed blood, and he was ready to spill his own daughters to get it back. The killing lasted only minutes, but it would spread around the world. This wasn't just another honor killing in rural Pakistan. This was murder in broad daylight, in the heart of Lahore, outside the very place that should protect innocent people. This is the story of how a young woman's choice to marry for love led to her death, and how that death showed a system that often protects killers more than victims. It's the story of Farzana Parveen. Welcome to the Crime Series. Before we begin, do us a quick favor. Drop your location and the time you're watching this in the comments. We want to know where you're tuning in from, because these stories matter everywhere. Like this video, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Farzana Parveen was born in the late 1980s into a traditional Pakistani family in rural Punjab, in a village where time seemed to move at the pace of ancient traditions. Her name meaning intelligent in Persian, she was the youngest daughter in a family that valued tradition above individual choice. The Parveen family home was a modest mud brick structure, typical of rural Punjab, with thick walls that provided relief from the scorching summer heat and small windows that kept the harsh winter winds at bay. The house was divided into clear gender zones, a practice as old as the village itself. Women's lives were dictated by male relatives, with every decision from daily meals to life partners requiring approval from fathers, brothers, or husbands. This wasn't considered oppression, but rather protection, a way of maintaining family honor and social order that had governed their community for generations. Her father, Muhammad Azim, was a weathered man whose hands bore the calluses of decades spent working as a laborer in the agricultural fields surrounding their village. He rose before dawn each day to tend crops that belonged to wealthier landowners, earning barely enough to keep his family fed and clothed. Despite his limited education, Azim commanded absolute authority within his household. His word was law, his decisions final, and his concept of family honor uncompromising. He worked in the same fields his father had worked, following the same routines, holding the same beliefs about women, family, and tradition. The family followed conservative Islamic traditions interpreted through centuries of tribal custom. Marriages were arranged by elders after careful consideration of family compatibility, economic status, and social standing. Daughters were expected to accept their parents' decisions without question, viewing arranged marriage not as imprisonment, but as their parents' loving attempt to secure their future. Love between spouses was expected to grow after marriage, not before. The Western concept of choosing one's own partner based on romantic attraction was not just foreign, but dangerous, a path that led to family dishonor and social chaos. Farzana's mother embodied the ideal woman of their conservative society. She rarely spoke in public, keeping her thoughts and opinions confined to the women's quarters of their modest home. When male visitors came to the house, she would retreat to the back rooms, communicating with her husband through whispered messages passed by children. Her life revolved around cooking, cleaning, caring for children, and maintaining the intricate social relationships between women in their extended family network. She had never questioned this arrangement because she had never known anything different. From early childhood, however, Farzana displayed signs of independence that both puzzled and concerned her family. While her elder sister Khalida accepted their mother's teachings about submission and obedience, Farzana asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. Why couldn't girls attend school as long as boys? Why did women have to cover themselves completely while men could dress freely? Why couldn't daughters choose their own husbands if sons could influence their parents' selection of brides? These questions weren't rebellious in intent. Farzana was genuinely curious about the world around her. But in a society where questioning established norms was seen as dangerous, her inquisitive nature marked her as potentially problematic. Farzana attended the village primary school briefly, sharing a single classroom with boys and girls of various ages, under the instruction of a teacher who had completed only middle school himself. She proved to be a quick learner, mastering reading and basic mathematics faster than many of her classmates. But when she reached puberty around age 12, her formal education ended abruptly. This wasn't unusual. Most families in their village pulled daughters out of school once they began developing into women, believing that continued education would make them unsuitable for marriage and family life. Her elder sister Khalida, who would later become a key witness in the family's version of events, described young Farzana as stubborn and determined, qualities that were admirable in boys but concerning in girls. Farzana refused to accept explanations like, because that's how things are done, or because it's tradition. She wanted to understand the reasons behind rules and customs, a trait that would both define her character and ultimately lead to her doom. Most marriages in their community occurred between cousins, a practice designed to keep property and wealth within extended families. These arrangements also ensured that brides would be marrying into familiar households where expectations and customs were already understood. The concept of romantic love as a basis for marriage was not just foreign, but potentially destructive. Families believed that marriages based on practical considerations, like economic compatibility and family honor, were more likely to succeed than unions founded on the temporary emotions of young people. Marriage negotiations resembled business transactions more than romantic courtships. Families evaluated potential matches based on reputation, financial status, and bloodlines. Bride prices were negotiated, dowries calculated, and wedding expenses divided according to ancient formulas that balanced the financial burden between families. Young people rarely met their intended spouses before engagement ceremonies, and those meetings were heavily supervised by elders who ensured that no inappropriate attraction could develop before marriage. As Farzana entered her 20s, pressure mounted for her to marry. Her family had identified her cousin Majar as a suitable husband. The arrangement followed traditional patterns, families negotiating bride price, determining wedding dates, and planning a future that would see Farzana move from her father's control to her husband's authority. By the early 2000s, rural Punjab was experiencing rapid change that would shape both her destiny and that of the man she would marry. Mobile phones were becoming common, bringing outside influences into traditional communities. Television programs showed different ways of living, creating tension between old customs and new possibilities. For young women like Farzana, these glimpses of the outside world planted dangerous ideas about choice and love that conflicted with their family's expectations. Farzana had secretly learned to read beyond basic levels and occasionally heard radio programs discussing women's rights. These influences planted seeds of rebellion that would grow into fatal defiance. By 2013, she was 24 and facing intense pressure to accept her arranged marriage to her cousin Mazar. Her family had already begun informal negotiations, and wedding preparations were expected to begin within months. But Farzana harbored a secret that would change everything. She had fallen in love with someone else. That someone was Muhammad Iqbal, a 45-year-old widower carrying the weight of a terrible secret. Living in the same rural area of Punjab, Iqbal came from slightly different circumstances than Farzana's family. He owned a small plot of land and had achieved a modest level of education, making him relatively prosperous in their agricultural community. But prosperity could not hide the darkness in his past. Iqbal's first marriage had produced 5 children, with his eldest son Aurangzeb already in his 20s. This made Iqbal old enough to be Farzana's father, an age gap that would later become one of many points of contention with her family, who viewed the relationship as inappropriate on multiple levels. What they didn't yet know was that Iqbal had already proven himself capable of deadly violence against the women in his life. In 2009, Iqbal's first wife, Ayesha Bibi, had died under circumstances that Iqbal initially concealed. What appeared to be a natural death was actually murder. Iqbal had strangled his wife during a domestic dispute. The killing remained hidden until years later when police investigation revealed the truth. Under Pakistan's Diyat law, family members could forgive murderers, effectively pardoning them from legal consequences. Iqbal's son Aurangzeb chose to forgive his father for killing his mother, allowing Iqbal to escape prosecution. This legal loophole, designed to promote reconciliation, often enabled domestic violence by allowing killers to avoid punishment when forgiven by relatives. The stage was now set for a collision between tradition and personal choice, between family honor and individual freedom, between a young woman seeking love and a man with blood on his hands. In Pakistan's conservative society, such conflicts often ended in violence. Farzana's story would become a stark example of what happened when these two worlds met, with consequences that neither she nor Iqbal could have anticipated. After Ayesha's death, Iqbal struggled to raise his 5 children alone. Rural Pakistani society expected widowers to remarry quickly, both for practical reasons and to maintain social respectability. Single fathers faced challenges managing households while working their land, creating pressure to find new wives. The widower's search for a second wife initially followed traditional channels. Family elders suggested potential matches among local widows and divorced women. But Iqbal had developed preferences that went beyond practical considerations. He wanted someone young and attractive, qualities that required looking beyond conventional remarriage options. When Iqbal first noticed Farzana, she was already engaged to her cousin. Her beauty and youth attracted him immediately, but approaching an engaged woman violated social norms. Traditional men would have respected existing arrangements and sought alternatives. Iqbal chose a different path. His pursuit of Farzana began carefully. Secret meetings in remote locations, messages passed through intermediaries, and gradual cultivation of romantic feelings. Iqbal understood that winning Farzana meant convincing her to break her engagement and defy her family. Dangerous territory in conservative Pakistani society. The relationship between the older widower and young woman developed over months. Iqbal promised Farzana freedom and love, contrasting with the arranged marriage she faced. He painted pictures of a different life where her opinions mattered and her happiness was considered. For a young woman facing unwanted marriage, these promises proved irresistible. As their interest deepened, Iqbal arranged more substantial meetings. He enlisted help from sympathetic relatives who provided safe locations for conversations. These sessions gave them opportunities to develop emotional connections beyond physical attraction. As their emotional bond deepened, the physical aspects of their relationship progressed beyond the boundaries of acceptable behavior in conservative Muslim society. The exact nature of their intimacy remains unclear from available evidence, but the consequences would soon become undeniable. Farzana became pregnant sometime in late 2013 or early 2014, creating a crisis that would force their secret relationship into the open with devastating results. The pregnancy changed everything overnight. Farzana realized she could no longer hide her involvement with Iqbal or postpone the inevitable confrontation with her family. The physical evidence of their relationship would soon become visible to everyone in their close-knit village community, making denial impossible and escape unlikely. The secret phase of their romance was ending, whether they were ready or not, and the consequences of discovery while unmarried would be catastrophic for both of them. Iqbal pressed for immediate marriage once Farzana revealed her pregnancy. He understood that discovery of her condition while unmarried would bring catastrophic consequences for both of them. Quick legal marriage might protect them from the worst outcomes, or so he argued when convincing Farzana to elope. When Farzana finally revealed her relationship to her parents, they were initially shocked, but surprisingly agreed to meet with Iqbal. However, this meeting revealed the true nature of their concerns. Farzana's father, Muhammad Azim, indicated he would consent to the marriage only if Iqbal paid a substantial sum as mahr, the Islamic dower that forms an essential part of Muslim wedding ceremonies. The amount demanded was far beyond what Iqbal could afford, suggesting the family was using financial demands to prevent the marriage rather than genuinely negotiating terms. Iqbal's refusal to pay the excessive mahr amount left the family feeling that they had been robbed of their daughter without proper compensation. In their view, if Farzana was determined to abandon her arranged marriage, the least Iqbal could do was pay adequately for the privilege of marrying her. His failure to meet their financial demands added economic grievance to their sense of social humiliation. Their decision to then marry secretly would prove to be the catalyst for tragedy. In traditional Pakistani society, marriage required family approval and elaborate ceremonies. Couples who married without permission faced social ostracism and sometimes violence. Farzana and Iqbal were about to discover just how dangerous their choices had become. If you've been following Farzana's story so far, take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. We cover real cases that deserve to be remembered, and your support helps us continue telling them in detail. In January 2014, Farzana Parveen, faced with advancing pregnancy and pressure from Muhammad Iqbal, she agreed to marry him secretly without her family's consent. This choice violated every social norm governing marriage in rural Pakistan and set the stage for the tragic events that would follow. Pakistani marriage law allows couples to register unions without family approval, but social custom demands parental consent and elaborate ceremonies. Secret marriages, while legally valid, are viewed as shameful and disrespectful to families who have invested time and resources in arranging suitable matches for their children. Farzana's decision meant abandoning her engagement to cousin Mazhar, arrangements that had been developing for over a year. Her family had already begun planning the wedding, accepting gifts from Mazhar's relatives and making financial commitments. Breaking the engagement would humiliate both families and require returning money they had already spent. The secret marriage ceremony took place at a local court in Lahore, far from their village, where recognition might compromise their safety. Iqbal brought 2 witnesses as required by law, men he trusted to maintain secrecy about the proceedings. Farzana wore simple clothes rather than traditional bridal attire, emphasizing the furtive nature of their union. After the legal ceremony, the couple returned to Iqbal's village, where they began living together as husband and wife. Farzana moved into the same house where Iqbal had lived with his previous wife, whom he had murdered 5 years earlier. The irony of this arrangement was lost on neither the couple nor their neighbors, who gradually learned about the marriage. News of the secret wedding spread through their rural community within days. Villagers who had known both families for generations were shocked by Farzana's defiance of her parents and her choice to marry a man so much older. Conservative society views such behavior as evidence of moral corruption requiring correction through family intervention. Farzana's family learned about the marriage through village gossip rather than direct communication from their daughter. This discovery created immediate crisis within their household. Her father, Muhammad Azim, felt publicly humiliated by his daughter's actions and faced social pressure to restore family honor through decisive action. Mazhar's family, equally humiliated by the broken engagement, demanded action from Farzana's relatives. They had invested money and emotion in wedding preparations, and now faced embarrassment within their own social circles. The two families' mutual shame created pressure for severe response to Farzana's rebellion. Traditional remedies for such situations typically involved forcing the woman to return home and proceed with originally planned arrangements. If persuasion failed, families sometimes resorted to violence to reassert control. Farzana's pregnancy complicated these options by making her condition obvious to everyone in their community. Iqbal understood the danger their marriage had created, but believed legal status would provide protection from family retaliation. He had underestimated the depth of anger and humiliation Farzana's choices had generated among her relatives. The couple's honeymoon period would be brief as her family began planning their response. Religious leaders in their village condemned Farzana's actions as violations of Islamic principles governing marriage and family relationships. They argued that her disobedience to parents constituted sin, requiring correction through whatever means necessary. This religious justification provided moral cover for increasingly violent plans. The extended family held meetings to discuss appropriate responses to Farzana's behavior. Male relatives debated options ranging from disowning her completely to forcing her return through kidnapping. The consensus emerged that dramatic action was necessary to restore family honor and deter similar behavior by other women. Farzana's brothers were particularly vocal in demanding severe punishment for their sister's rebellion. They faced ridicule from peers who questioned their masculinity and ability to control female relatives. This social pressure pushed them toward violent solutions that might restore their damaged reputations. Attempts at reconciliation proved futile. Farzana refused to return home or abandon her marriage to Iqbal. She had committed completely to her new life and would not be persuaded to resume her previous engagement. Her defiance strengthened family resolve to take more drastic measures. Facing limited options for reclaiming their daughter through traditional means, Farzana's family turned to Pakistan's legal system in March 2014. They filed kidnapping charges against Muhammad Iqbal, claiming he had abducted their daughter against her will and forced her into an illegal marriage. The kidnapping case represented a common strategy used by Pakistani families to challenge unwanted marriages. By claiming their daughter had been taken against her will, parents could argue that any subsequent marriage was invalid and that the woman needed rescue from her captor. This legal framework allowed families to use state power to enforce traditional marriage arrangements. Muhammad Azim filed the complaint at the local police station, providing a sworn statement that Iqbal had kidnapped Farzana and was holding her captive. He claimed his daughter would never have chosen to marry an older widower and that she must have been coerced or threatened into submission. The police investigation that followed was perfunctory at best. Officers took Azim's statement but made little effort to independently verify his claims. The kidnapping allegation fit familiar patterns that police had seen many times before, where families used criminal charges to contest love marriages. Iqbal faced immediate harassment from law enforcement after the charges were filed. Police conducted weekly raids on his home, searching for evidence of kidnapping and intimidating the couple through their constant presence. These raids served to publicize the legal conflict and demonstrate official support for Farzana's family. The couple hired lawyer Mustafa Karal to contest the kidnapping charges and defend their marriage. Karal understood that Pakistani courts generally supported arranged marriages over love matches, but he believed Farzana's testimony about her voluntary choices would provide adequate defense. Farzana's family submitted additional documentation to support their kidnapping claims, including forged papers allegedly proving her previous marriage to cousin Mazhar. Under Pakistani law, if a woman was already married, any subsequent union would be bigamous and criminal, punishable by up to 7 years in prison. Iqbal protested that the marriage documents were fabricated, but proving forgery required extensive legal proceedings that would take months to resolve. Meanwhile, the kidnapping charges remained active, subjecting him to continued police harassment and potential arrest. As the legal battle continued through the spring of 2014, the conflict between Farzana's family and the couple took increasingly violent turns. What had begun as kidnapping charges and court proceedings escalated into direct physical confrontations that foreshadowed the tragedy to come. The first serious incident occurred in April 2014 when more than a dozen men on motorcycles attacked Farzana and Iqbal's home. The assailants, identified by neighbors as relatives of Farzana, threw stones at windows and shouted threats before disappearing into the night. Police investigation of the attack was minimal, despite clear evidence of organized violence. Following the motorcycle attack, Iqbal made the decision to send Farzana to a women's shelter in Lahore for protection. The shelter, operated by a human rights organization, provided temporary housing for women facing domestic violence and family threats. Farzana spent nearly a month there, while Iqbal tried to negotiate with her family through intermediaries. During her time at the shelter, Farzana spoke with counselors about her fears and the threats she was facing. According to shelter records, she expressed concern that her family might try to kill her if they had the opportunity. She also mentioned fears about Iqbal himself, having learned about his previous wife's mysterious death. The women's shelter provided Farzana with information about her legal rights and options for protection. Counselors explained that she could request police protection or apply for court orders restricting her family's contact with her. However, such measures required ongoing court involvement and offered limited practical protection in rural Pakistan. After nearly a month at the shelter, Farzana made a fateful decision. She chose to return to Iqbal despite continuing threats from her family. Her pregnancy was advancing, and she wanted to live with her husband rather than remain indefinitely in institutional care. The shelter staff warned her about the dangers of returning, but could not legally prevent her departure. Their warnings proved prophetic. Upon Farzana's return, the threats against the couple intensified dramatically. Her family members began making public statements about their intentions to restore family honor through whatever means necessary. The pregnancy was becoming increasingly visible, creating permanent evidence of what her family viewed as shameful disobedience. Traditional honor codes demanded dramatic action to restore family reputation. By late May 2014, the situation had reached a breaking point. Farzana's family had exhausted legal remedies and faced saving compromises. The couple's lawyer, Mustafa Karl, scheduled what they hoped would be the final court appearance, an opportunity for Farzana to provide testimony about her voluntary marriage that would finally disprove her family's kidnapping allegations and allow them to live freely. The morning of May 27, 2014 began like many others for Farzana and Muhammad Iqbal, but it would end in tragedy. They woke in their small home, prepared for another day of legal proceedings, and made their way to Lahore for what they believed would be the final resolution of the kidnapping charges. Neither understood they were walking into a carefully planned ambush. The couple left their village around 6:30 a.m., traveling by bus to reach Lahore before their 8 a.m. appointment. Farzana wore simple clothes appropriate for court proceedings. During the hour-long journey, they discussed their hopes for finally ending the legal harassment that had dominated their brief marriage. They had no idea that her family was already in position, waiting for them at the High Court with deadly intentions. Meanwhile, Farzana's family was implementing their own plan for the day. Nearly 20 relatives, including her father, Muhammad Azim, her 2 brothers, cousin Mazhar, and several other male relatives, had traveled to Lahore the previous evening. They knew about the scheduled court appearance and had positioned themselves strategically around the High Court building. The family members brought weapons concealed in their clothing, including guns, sticks, and access to construction materials near the court building. Their plan was carefully coordinated, with different relatives assigned specific roles in the attack they were planning. At 7:40 a.m., Farzana and Iqbal met with their lawyer at his office near the court. Karl briefed them on the testimony Farzana would provide, and reassured them that the case would likely be resolved in their favor. The atmosphere was optimistic as they prepared to walk the short distance to the High Court building. The group left the lawyer's office at 7:45 a.m. for what should have been a 5-minute walk to the courthouse. They moved through the busy morning traffic of central Lahore, passing vendors, commuters, and other court attendees, beginning their daily activities. The normalcy of the scene provided no warning of the violence about to unfold. As they approached the main gate of the High Court complex, Farzana's family members emerged from their hiding places among parked cars and nearby buildings. The attack began with gunshots fired into the air, creating panic among pedestrians and attracting attention to the unfolding confrontation. Farzana's relatives immediately attempted to grab her and pull her away from Iqbal, shouting that they were rescuing their daughter from her kidnapper. When she resisted and clung to her husband, the family members began beating both of them with sticks and their fists, escalating the violence beyond their original plan. The scene quickly descended into chaos as approximately 20 men surrounded the couple in broad daylight. Police officers were visible nearby but made no immediate attempt to intervene in what they may have initially viewed as a family dispute. The lack of official response encouraged the attackers to continue and intensify their assault. Within minutes, the situation had moved beyond rescue to murder, as Farzana's family members picked up bricks from a nearby construction site and began pelting her with them. Her cries for help echoed through the busy street, but no bystanders or officials moved to protect her from the escalating violence. Iqbal attempted to shield his wife from the projectiles, but was overwhelmed by the number of attackers. Several family members held him back, while others concentrated their assault on Farzana. His later testimony described watching helplessly as his pregnant wife was systematically beaten to death by her own relatives. Family members pelted Farzana with shoes, a particularly degrading act in Pakistani culture that symbolizes ultimate disrespect. Some witnesses reported that several attackers danced around her fallen body, celebrating the restoration of their family's honor through her death. Farzana's final words, according to Iqbal's testimony, were desperate pleas for mercy. "Don't kill me." Her cries attracted more attention from bystanders, but nobody intervened to stop the attack. The public nature of the killing was intentional, designed to demonstrate the family's commitment to restoring their honor through decisive action. The stoning continued for several minutes after Farzana had fallen unconscious. Family members wanted to ensure she was dead and to make the event as public and humiliating as possible. The extended duration of the attack gave police ample time to intervene, but officers remained at their posts without taking action. One family member fashioned a makeshift noose from cloth and placed it around Farzana's neck, adding strangulation to the bludgeoning she had already endured. The attack finally ended when Farzana showed no signs of life and lay motionless in a pool of blood outside the High Court building. Her family members began to disperse, with most fleeing the scene immediately. Only her father remained behind, calmly surrendering to police and claiming responsibility for what he called an honor killing. Iqbal cradled his wife's broken body as emergency medical personnel arrived. His clothes were soaked with her blood, and he was in obvious shock from witnessing the brutal murder. Paramedics quickly determined that Farzana was dead, but they transported her body to a local hospital where the death was officially confirmed. The entire attack had lasted less than 10 minutes, but had been witnessed by scores of people in one of Lahore's busiest areas. The public nature of the killing and the complete lack of intervention by authorities or bystanders would become central elements in the international outrage that followed. The murder scene remained chaotic for hours as police cordoned off the area and began collecting evidence. Blood stains on the pavement and scattered bricks provided physical evidence of the violent attack, while witnesses gave statements about what they had observed during the killing. Senior police officer Naseem Butt arrived at the scene approximately 30 minutes after the attack ended. His investigation began with the arrest of Muhammad Azim, who had remained at the scene and readily admitted to organizing his daughter's murder. Azim showed no remorse and described the killing as necessary to restore family honor. The hospital examination of Farzana's body documented extensive trauma consistent with beating and stoning. She had suffered multiple skull fractures, broken bones, and internal injuries that would have been individually fatal. The medical examiner confirmed that she had been 3 months pregnant at the time of her death. Police investigator Rana Mujahid was assigned to lead the case and immediately faced pressure from multiple directions. Human rights organizations demanded thorough investigation and prosecution, while local community leaders suggested that the family had acted within their traditional rights. This conflict reflected broader tensions within Pakistani society about women's rights and family authority. The search for additional suspects proved challenging as most family members had fled Lahore immediately after the attack. Police conducted raids in their home village, but found that the extended family had scattered to avoid arrest. The investigation relied heavily on witness identifications and Iqbal's testimony about who had participated in the killing. Iqbal's own background complicated his role as the primary witness to his wife's murder. When police investigation revealed his 2009 killing of his first wife, prosecutors questioned his credibility and motivations. Some investigators wondered whether Iqbal had somehow orchestrated the attack to eliminate an inconvenient wife, though no evidence supported this theory. The forensic examination of the murder weapon, the bricks used to kill Farzana, provided little useful information beyond confirming the cause of death. The construction materials were common and untraceable, offering no leads about premeditation or planning. However, the systematic nature of the attack suggested considerable advance organization. Cell phone records from family members revealed extensive communication in the days before the murder, supporting the theory that the attack was planned rather than spontaneous. These records showed calls between various relatives and coordination of travel to Lahore, providing evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. The investigation faced significant obstacles due to the social context of honor killings in Pakistan. Local police had limited experience treating such cases as serious crimes, often viewing them as family disputes requiring mediation rather than prosecution. This attitude influenced evidence collection and witness interviewing procedures. International media attention complicated the investigation by creating pressure for quick results while simultaneously making witnesses less cooperative. Despite these challenges, investigators eventually identified 12 family members who had participated in the attack. The evidence included witness testimony, cell phone records, and statements from Muhammad Azim describing how he had organized and led the assault on his daughter. The case would proceed to trial with substantial evidence of premeditated murder. The trial of Farzana's killers began in September 2014, 4 months after her murder. The proceedings took place in a Lahore court amid heightened security and intense media scrutiny. International attention focused on whether Pakistan's legal system would deliver justice in such a high-profile, honor-killing case. The prosecution, led by State Prosecutor Abdul Samad, faced the challenge of proving premeditated murder against defendants who openly admitted to killing Farzana, but claimed justification under traditional honor codes. Pakistani law provides no legal recognition for honor killings, treating them as ordinary murders, but social attitudes often influenced court proceedings. 12 family members were ultimately charged with murder, including Muhammad Azim, Farzana's 2 brothers, cousin Majar, and 8 other relatives. The defendants were represented by defense lawyer Mansour Afridi, who argued that his clients had acted to protect family honor and should receive lenient treatment. The defense strategy focused on portraying Farzana as a woman who had violated social norms and brought shame to her family through her unauthorized marriage. Afridi argued that the defendants had been provoked beyond endurance by her behavior, and that their response, while tragic, was understandable within Pakistani cultural context. Witness testimony dominated the early phases of the trial. Prosecutor Samad called dozens of witnesses who had observed the attack, establishing the brutal nature of the killing and the active participation of multiple family members. These testimonies painted a picture of systematic violence that lasted several minutes. Iqbal testified extensively about the events leading up to his wife's murder and his observations during the attack. His testimony was crucial for establishing the premeditated nature of the killing and identifying specific family members who had participated. However, defense lawyers challenged his credibility by highlighting his previous murder conviction. The medical examiner's testimony provided graphic details about Farzana's injuries and the cause of death. The extensive trauma documented during the autopsy supported prosecution arguments about the brutal and systematic nature of the attack. Defense lawyers could not challenge the medical evidence, but argued it demonstrated family provocation rather than criminal intent. Muhammad Azim's testimony from the defendant's stand proved particularly damaging to the defense case. He expressed no remorse for his daughter's death and repeated his claims that the killing was necessary to restore family honor. His attitude demonstrated the premeditated nature of the crime and his continued commitment to the values that had motivated the murder. Prosecution arguments emphasized individual rights and rule of law, while defense positions reflected traditional views about family honor and women's subordination to male relatives. Media coverage of the trial brought additional pressure on the court system to deliver justice in the case. International human rights organizations monitored the proceedings closely, viewing the trial as a test of Pakistan's commitment to protecting women's rights and prosecuting honor killings. The defense attempted to introduce evidence about Farzana's alleged previous marriage to cousin Majar, arguing that her union with Iqbal was invalid and that she had deceived her family about her marital status. However, prosecution lawyers successfully demonstrated that the marriage documents were forged and inadmissible. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the evidence against the defendants was overwhelming. Multiple witnesses had identified them as participants in the attack. Physical evidence supported the prosecution's timeline, and their own statements admitted to the killing. The only question was whether the court would treat honor killing as equivalent to ordinary murder. The trial concluded in November 2014 after 2 months of proceedings. Both prosecution and defense presented closing arguments that reflected broader debates within Pakistani society about tradition, modernity, and women's rights. On November 19, 2014, the Lahore court delivered its verdict in the trial of Farzana Parveen's killers. The decision represented a significant moment in Pakistan's struggle with honor killings and would influence how such cases were prosecuted in the future. The international community watched closely to see whether Pakistani justice would prevail over traditional attitudes. The court found 4 defendants guilty of murder: Muhammad Azim, Farzana's father, her 2 brothers, and cousin Majar. These 4 received death sentences and fines of $1,000 each. The judge determined that their participation in the killing was central to the crime and that they deserved the maximum penalty under Pakistani law. One additional cousin received a 10-year prison sentence for his supporting role in the attack. The court determined that while he had participated in the violence, his involvement was less central than the primary defendants. 7 other family members were acquitted due to insufficient evidence of their direct participation in the killing. Judge Muhammad Anwar delivered the verdict in a packed courtroom where security was tight due to concerns about potential violence from either supporters or opponents of the decision. The judge's statement emphasized that honor killings would be treated as ordinary murders under Pakistani law, regardless of cultural justifications offered by defendants. The prosecution expressed satisfaction with the verdict, arguing that the death sentences sent a strong message that honor killings would face serious legal consequences. Prosecutor Abdul Samad stated that the decision demonstrated Pakistan's commitment to protecting women's rights and upholding rule of law over traditional practices. Defense lawyer Mansour Afridi immediately announced plans to appeal the verdict, claiming that the sentences were excessive and based on sensationalism rather than legal principles. He argued that his clients had been unfairly targeted due to international pressure on Pakistani courts to deliver harsh punishments in honor-killing cases. The families of the convicted defendants expressed shock and anger at the verdict, maintaining that they had acted within their traditional rights as family members. Community reaction in their home village was mixed, with some supporting the court's decision, while others viewed the defendants as victims of foreign pressure on Pakistani culture. The death sentences faced an important practical limitation. Pakistan had maintained a moratorium on executions since 2008, meaning that death row inmates were effectively serving life sentences. This policy meant that while the symbolic impact of death sentences was significant, the actual punishment would be long-term imprisonment. International human rights organizations welcomed the verdict as an important step toward ending impunity for honor killings in Pakistan. If you believe these stories should be told and remembered, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video. Your support helps us keep these voices alive and push for awareness worldwide.